These memories, how did they come to you?
Well, my mother had mentioned it. I mean, I feel like I've repeated the same thing.
How many interviews have you done now?
Probably 8 or 9,
Yeah.
But I've also, as I started remembering what happened, I would talk to friends, talk to my family about what I remembered, and because it's a rather fascinating story, I think. But my mother had mentioned this at her birthday party in 2009, so it was September of 2009, and I remembered my father telling me the same thing at that point, and then I thought, gosh, when my mother said it, I don't know, my mother's word's always been as good as gold to me, and not that my dad's wasn't, but Dad was a great guy, but had a really great imagination too, and I certainly identified with his statement when he made it, but I didn't really have time to search and explore it.
So what did your dad say?
He told me that I was asking him what he thought happened to his brother, my Uncle LD, and I questioned if he thought he was still alive. And he said, I think he is alive. And I said, well, then why didn't he come to Grandma Irene's funeral? Because my grandmother had died in the early, mid-70s when I lived in Colorado. And he said, because I think he's hiding. And when I questioned why he'd be hiding from, he had said the FBI or the CIA or something, he said, don't you remember he hijacked that airplane? And Dewey helped him. And I'm pretty sure that my other uncle's name has been released. I've probably blurted it out. I was trying to keep it out of...
Dewey?
Yeah, Dewey was my other uncle. Anyway, my mother speculated similar suspicions at her birthday party, and she wasn't very open to talk about it. When I started questioning her and my sister started questioning her, she got really uncomfortable. And then I went online that very night, read the story, and as of course the composite looks more like my dad than my uncle. The first composite does anyway. And over the next few days, I really just kept thinking about what I had read, but also remembering things that happened in my childhood around that time. And at first I thought I wasn't, that I was just identifying with the article I read, but then my memories were specific and additional to what I had read in that story. And I thought, I called, my family members, my brother, my sister, tried to get more information out of my mother. And, what I realized is my brother and sister really weren't in the same vicinity I was. They were in the house or they'd gone somewhere. I'm not sure where they were exactly because it was really, really early in the morning. I'm pretty certain that my mother and grandmother had gone to the restaurant when my grandmother made pies. And I don't know if she was baking the turkey there or what. I mean, it's odd to me that they were there. They were not in the house on Thanksgiving morning, but it seems to me that that's where they had gone, was the restaurant. And I realized that there was nobody else alive who'd witnessed what had happened, what transpired between my dad and my uncles. And I remembered my father admonishing me, that I could not tell anybody what I had seen, that it was a matter of life and death, and that my uncles had done something extremely foolish, and that my Uncle LD could literally die. He could suffer a death penalty for what he had done. And so I blocked that out of my mind. A week after the incident, I went to my dad very secretly and said, can I tell this at show and tell that Uncle LD hijacked an airplane, that he's a hijacker? And he said, no, of course you can't. And again, sat with me and, gave me a really long lecture about that. And so I never spoke about it. And, my life was full of a lot of changes. My family moved often, and it was a very active life. There was a lot of things that happened.
And you never saw your uncle again?
No, I did. Actually, that was misstated
Okay.
with the first interview that I had with ABC. I told them I did see him again. I saw him the following Christmas, a year later, and actually during that year I saw him.
Wow.
A few months, and I've tried to set that straight in the other interviews I've had, but I did see him again. I saw him up until, I don't remember seeing him again after Christmas of 1972, and that was when he gave me a belt that he had hand tooled out of, with his leather working skills, and he gave all of us gifts. He gave my mother a guitar strap, and then he made 2 of them for her, and my father had a guitar strap. My sister and I were given belts that had kind of an unusual shape to them.
Well, that's the guitar. One of the guitar straps is what you gave to the FBI?
My mother gave it to the FBI. It was her guitar strap, but she, I made them aware that it was still in existence, and
Okay.
they were they're still, they will never be able to prove who did it. The FBI agents told me that if my uncle was standing there in front of them and confessing, unless they can place him on the plane, there's no proving the case. And so the DNA evidence that they had in their files, in their case file, is defective. I know that some of it had been destroyed years ago. It's a very old case. A lot of hands have I'm sure been, it's gone from one special agent to another. And so I don't know what happened to the reliable DNA evidence that they had. But the necktie only yielded a partial DNA sample. And so what they extracted from the daughter that my uncle had years later, whom of course I've never met, it was inconclusive. They realized that the DNA they have really couldn't prove.
So they've taken DNA from
a girl who's my cousin, yeah.
And they didn't get anywhere with that.
Well, they were of course able to identify what my uncle's DNA looks like, but they don't have DNA of a
They told you
hijacker.
this?
Yes, they did. They do have fingerprints, and so that was the purpose of me giving them this was the only thing that my family that I've been in contact with had, that would have fingerprints of his.
Have you talked to your cousin?
No, I don't have her telephone number. I've never met her. I didn't even know she existed until the FBI.
What's your
told me.
mother? Have you talked to your mother in the last couple of days since this
sure, yeah.
How's she doing? How's she about all this?
She's good, actually.
Is she an Oklahoman?
Yes, she
Okay.
lives in Tulsa. She was interviewed yesterday was it yesterday, I guess? I don't know. The week's kind of been a blur. But yeah, she was interviewed, and she was on the news yesterday, and, had made her statements, and yeah.
So I can. I'm not going to call her, so I can look up the interview. What's her name?
Her name is Grace Haley.
Grace Haley.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's. You can see her interview online and hear what she said. And
Well, did you undergo hypnosis at all to get to the memories?
I wanted to. I really wanted to, and I spoke to a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I'm having these memories. I'm not fully convinced that I'm remembering everything there is to remember, and I'm at that time. That was within a day or two after I had had the conversation with my mother, and a client of mine that I was working with told me, well, she was a psychiatrist, and I said, gosh, do you know anybody who does hypnosis? Because I really would be interested. And she advised me, she said, really just get in a quiet place, just be quiet within yourself and relax. Try not to think about it. The memories they'll come back to you. They'll come back to you. And she was right. I had at that time had the luxury of working from home, and had many, many hours of solitude and quietness, and I don't have a TV, and so I was able to just really focus on the memories that were surfacing.
two things, and to go back to the seeing your uncle again at Christmas, did the hijacking come up then?
Not that I remember.
Was he more wealthy then, or?
Oh, no. He lost the money on the way down. My
he lost
dad,
all of it.
Yes.
Did,
that's what I've been told. And their conversation was, we're rich, our money problems are over, we just have to go back into the woods and get the money. And when my father in 1995 had the conversation with me, I said, what do you do with the money? And he said he dropped it on the way down. He said he had a problem with the backpack. He had it strapped to himself, and when he was trying to make the chute open, backpack, whatever, parachute, he said when he was trying to get the chute to open, the money came loose. He dropped it, and he was wasn't actually a well thought out plan, I don't think.
Do you know where your uncle lived at the time?
I think that he was living in my grandmother's house. He was going through a divorce. I remember spending time growing up, when the family would gather, the kids were always sent to one bedroom or the other. There were 3 bedrooms in my grandmother's house, and the 2 rooms that the kids would go to were across the hallway from each other with a bathroom in between. And my uncle, at that time, my uncle LD lived in the bedroom on the right, and my uncle Dewey, I think, lived in the bedroom on the left. They were both going through divorces or had gone through divorces. I'm kind of unclear on what exactly was happening in their personal lives, but they were very different in their personal habits.
And they're both dead? He died in 1999?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How are you aware that he's dead?
The FBI told me. I remember more now that I've really thought about it and focused on it. I think as we grow older, we live in the moment, and I certainly developed that skill fairly early on.
Okay.
I am a reflective person as well, but I guess, I don't know, like anybody who has a suppressed memory, and I have friends who have had terribly suppressed memories of traumatic experiences that they had as children, people who suffered abuse and had been violated in horrific ways that they didn't remember until they were middle age. So I can't explain how but it was just eventually, within a few days, I realized that I'm having my own memories. It wasn't what I read. I mean, certainly reading it triggered something. Yeah. It triggered something in my mind that made me stop and say, this is very familiar to me. So that's what made me believe that I had a real story.
You have a name for your book yet?
I don't have a name for it yet.
How far are you on the book?
I have an outline and a couple of chapters written, and now that I'm under pressure to get it done, I mean, my goal was always to have it finished this year, and this year it's just been a full year, but I'm a pretty quick writer. When I write, it flows out of me. I write every day. I don't always write about that, but about that subject. But
so, yeah, what did you hear Lyle say again? I know you've said it now probably 10 or 15 times. What did you hear Lyle?
Lyle?
I'm sorry. What's the uncle's name?
LD.
LD. What's his?
Dewey was the other uncle.
Dewey.
And really, it was Dewey who was doing most of the talking to my father. I assume you're talking about when they came back.
Yeah, and what was LD's full name?
Lynn Doyle.
Lynn,
Cooper.
I'm sorry, I
That's
said Lyle.
Okay.
Lynn.
It's okay.
Lynn, all right.
Yeah, but he was LD. The only person to call him Lynn was my grandmother.
So did you hear Lynn say anything? It was mostly Dewey.
After the jump, he was really hurt. I don't remember him doing much talking at all.
Yeah.
He was suffering.
Okay. Dewey, is it D-E-W-E-Y?
I-E, I
D-E-W?
D-E-W-I-E, I think.
Okay. I saw an interview on Channel 9, you were talking about having vivid dreams with Lyle, or Was LD in them?
LD.
Yeah.
Was that on there?
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of. I only saw
You
what
don't
was
have
on.
you don't have
ABC.
TV.
I don't have a TV, and so I've seen very little of what's been, released. I've read, the recants of what I said, and some things I said were, repeated again and again and again, and then other things were really left out. So it's kind of I wish that the whole story was out, but that's what my book is for. Yeah, I had a dream the night before my polygraph test that was very vivid with my dad and all of his brothers, and yeah, it was very personal and dear. It was kind of a reassuring dream.
You had a polygraph test of the FBI
Yes, in January.
of this year.
Yes,
Here in Oklahoma City, or
yes, the Oklahoma City field office here.
and how did that come out?
Well, I passed. It was nerve-wracking. It's their job to really dig deep into
sure,
the
they've
core
got
of your being, and you start realizing your flaws. But they found me to be very honest, and that I had a lot of integrity, and the polygrapher said. He just kept reminding me, remember who you are, because I think he and the other agents that I've spoken with really did believe me.
Well, because you're aware that there is some skepticism that somebody would actually use their real name to hijack, and that they would actually
use it, and he has an initial, but he didn't use DB Cooper to sign, and he called himself Dan Cooper.
Yeah.
Which was why my father was, very angry, because I remember my dad saying they're going to think it's me.
Was your dad's name?
Was Don.
Don,
and he signed in as Dan, which was this comic book that he collected, and so I said this in the first interview. He clearly was not in his right mind. He, I believe, was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. He was a very troubled man from the family stories that have been told. I only had fond memories of him, but my mother and other relatives said that before the Korean War, he was, just a sweet, just like my dad and his brothers, just fun-loving. And I remember him still being that way, but I do remember a couple of episodes where he became really angered and enraged, and I think he was suffering from a brain injury. Something that I did see in an article online that was stated, because I've been accused of doing this for selfish gain and things like that, and I am writing a book. I think it's a fascinating story and I only have my memories. I don't have years and years of research that people did. I only have my own speculation and my own memories. But it's my hope that the proceeds from my book and things that I'll be able to give to the Veterans Administration, to use whatever publicity and things like that are coming forward, to really do something to help our soldiers coming home from the wars that we're in now. And
So you're saying that you plan, if you do complete the book and make some money off of it, that you're going to use you're going to donate your some of the money or all the money?
Obviously I have a lot of expenses involved in my own research of this.
Yeah.
It's not going to be. I'm not a wealthy woman, but yeah, I plan to. To use whatever publicity comes from it that does have financial gain, to give a goodly part of it to the Veterans Administration, or to I'm not sure yet. I have a friend who is
some organization to help veterans.
Help the veterans, yeah. One of my good friends is a psychologist with the Veterans Administration here in Oklahoma City, and I'd like to consult with him on how to go about that. What would be most beneficial? Where are they lacking to give care for?
Well, the polygraph test, that really intrigued me. And let me say before I divert to change subjects, that's very admirable to donate to veterans.
Well, sadly, that hasn't been mentioned much either. I mean, I've stated it in most of the interviews that I've had because, my family really called me to task. Why are you really doing this, Marla? And one is it's my civic duty. I witnessed the confession of a crime. I witnessed the plotting of it, and I was a little girl when it happened. I wasn't accountable, but as an adult, I'm aware of what happened, and so it's when you're aware of a crime that's happened and you're a witness to it, you have an obligation. But beyond that, I missed my relationship with my uncle. He, in my dad's family, he was the uncle I always really looked forward to seeing when we would gather, and he vanished. I never saw him again after 1972. My siblings didn't. I rarely saw my other uncles or cousins or anybody, but I felt when I initially contacted the FBI, I had hoped that they would find him alive. I mean, I would have loved to have talked to him. I would have loved to have interviewed him myself and asked him why did you go away. I do understand somewhat why he did it, why he vanished. He was protecting himself, of course, but he went on to live a different life, but it was deprived of his siblings and nieces and nephews and mother.
Did your dad ever talk about it besides that one time before he died in '95?
No, he did not. He and I spoke about it shortly thereafter when I wanted to share at Show and Tell.
Yeah.
To my recollection, I know he never discussed it with the rest of my family, and I don't think he ever talked to me about it again.
The polygraph test, like I said, intrigued me. How long did it take?
About 5.5 hours.
5.5 hours?
I was not hooked up to a machine that whole time, but yeah, there was a long period of questioning and a lot of digging, into what I remembered and questioning each and every point of what I had relayed as far as information in every interview that I'd had with law enforcement officers along the way. And then there was the actual test where they ask the questions again and again and again and again, and then they disconnect you from the machine, and then they do it again and again and again. And
they attach you to the machine more than one time?
Yes.
Wow. Did they ask oddball questions? Were they trying to figure out if you were a crackpot or?
Sure. Oh yeah. But they were.
They didn't ask if you believed in aliens or something.
No, they didn't ask
like that.
They asked the question several different ways, and questions that they asked, and then they would ask just rote questions. What's your name? What color's the sky? Something like that. Am I wearing a blue shirt? Things to establish. They establish like a normal rhythm to your reactions to telling the truth. So, yeah, it took a very long time, and they were extremely thorough, and it was an emotional experience. They don't just talk about what you're there to talk about. They dig pretty deeply into your character.
But you passed.
I passed. And they wanted to make sure, too, beforehand that I recognized the consequences, that if I was lying to them, that I would probably be prosecuted for it.
Well, they told you that?
They made sure that I understood that. They didn't tell me that. They said, what do you think would be the consequences for somebody to waste all of these man hours and lead us down this crazy rabbit trail? And that's not the words they used. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And I said, well, I'm sure that there would be pretty severe consequences, but I'm not. They said, why should we believe you? And I'm not making this up. I have my memories, and that's all I'm here to tell you. I was a child when this happened, but these are my memories, and they're my real memories. And
you don't have any doubt that they're your real memories?
No, I don't.